You are watching a movie of a PowerPoint slideshow on the history of the British colonies in North America. As you watch the movie, I will be giving you the information that you need to answer the questions on your note sheet. The controls for the movie will show up at the bottom of the movie window. If you need time to write the answers on your sheet, press pause, like I'm doing now. You can use the slider bar to go back over parts of the movie that you need to have repeated. Very simple. As you can see, the bar disappears when you don't have your cursor on it. It will reappear when you do put the cursor on it, so you should be fine. Volume is over here to make it louder or softer as you need. Pay attention, fill out your note sheet. Station 7, Slavery in the British Colonies. Slavery was a very sad part of American history, but also a very important part of American history. Slavery played a huge role in making America what it is today, for good and for bad. Problem: Southern farmers only have hand tools which require large numbers of people to work very hard for very long periods of time in very hot and humid conditions. An example of this would be like going into your front or backyard with a pair of scissors and cutting the grass with the scissors. That would be a very big job. It would be very painful, and it would take a long, long time, and no one would want to do that. And that was the problem that Southern farmers had. They had a lot of work to do out in their fields, but not anywhere near enough people who wanted to go out into the fields to do all the work. Now, in the photo, we see Southern farmers working tobacco plants. These are the tobacco plants here. Very big fat leaves. That's the money. That's the tobacco leaf that gets dried and rolled up and ground and smoked. Okay? Tobacco plants require much more intense work than the corn that we see here in the background. Corn is a wonderful crop. It is basically plant it and forget about it. It grows very tall very quickly. No weeds grow taller. It can outlast the weeds. It can get as much all the sunlight that it needs. Its roots are very aggressive. It's a wonderful plant. Plant and forget. Tobacco, on the other hand, these very small plants down here, require an enormous amount of work. These three farmers here are working with their tools to weed around the tobacco plants. Tobacco plants grow very slowly. The weeds would crowd them out, take all the sun, take all the nutrients out of the soil, take all the moisture out of the soil, and the tobacco plants would die unless the workers worked on it. Also, the bugs, insects, love these tender, juicy, nicotine-flavored leaves, and these farmhands would also be required to pick all of the bugs off the leaves. Okay, every single one of these leaves, and the bugs don't live and eat on the top part of the leaf. They eat the bottom part of the leaf. They do that because any predator birds and things like that that would be flying around would eat them if they were on the top of the leaf. So they eat on the bottom of the leaf, and then when the birds are flying around, the birds can't see them, so they're protected. All right, but bugs just love and can decimate an entire crop of tobacco very, very quickly. So that is why it was such a problem getting workers out there, because they had so much work to do. And remember, we're talking about down south where it gets to be 110, 120 degrees a lot during the summer, very, very high humidity, so it's very difficult work. Possible solutions. You are going to fill in the chart on your note sheet with the following information. Please fill it out as we go. If you need to pause this, movie to get everything done, that is okay. Remember to use the slider bar at the bottom of the page. Now, I'm not in the movie right now, so you don't see a slider bar, but if you guys did this, you'd see a slider bar down here, and then you could pause. Native Americans. The word Native Americans goes in the top left part of your chart that is numbered 1. That is the first group of people that were originally tried to be used as farm workers by the Southern farmers, because there were so many Native Americans already around the Southern colonies. The result of this, which you will write down in the right side of the chart for number 1, Native Americans, was that the Native Americans quickly died of diseases because they were not immune. We've talked about this a great deal in the past. So Native Americans as farm laborers obviously did not solve the farm labor shortage that the Southern farmers had, because the Native Americans that you can see here in the picture out working in the fields would die off fairly rapidly because of the disease. And those that didn't die off from disease would run off, because remember, they're Native Americans. They're in their homeland. They know where they are. They can run away and get back home again. So that didn't work out at all. So Native Americans were tried as a solution to the labor problem. Didn't work. They died of disease, and they ran away very quickly. So for the solution part, or the not solution part, the result part, please make sure that you have written quickly died of disease. Next, indentured servants. This is group number 2 on your chart. Indentured servants were poor people from England who got a free trip to America, and in return they were contracted in an agreement, or indentured, is the words that they used back then, to the farmer in America who had paid for their trip. Most indentures, or contract workers, contract servants, were for 6 to 8 years, and if the indentured servant finished their contract, they had to be freed and given some land to go and farm on their own. This was a fairly popular way for poor people to get away from England, where they had no land, to get to America, and after doing, 6 or 8 years of very hard labor, they would be able to start their own farm and grow some of their own tobacco, making some pretty good money so that they could buy more land and grow more tobacco and make more money, and maybe get to the point before they went to the great beyond of having to hire and contract their own indentured servants. So this was a way for some people to get ahead in America. But there is a downside. The result of the indenture being up and over with was that the farmer had only solved his labor problem temporarily, right? And this is definitely something that you want to write on your chart for result. They must be allowed to leave when the indenture is over. So this was not a permanent solution. This indentured servant might be a wonderful farm laborer for 6 or 8 years if he lived, if he didn't run away to a city and kind of blend in with the rest of the English colonists that were there. If he stayed and if he lived, you had to free him at the end of his indenture. So this was also not a perfect solution for the Southern farmers who needed farm workers all the time. All right? And that's when we get to African slaves. African slaves is the name for the last group on your chart, and that would be group number 3, and on your chart, on your note sheet, that would be the bottom left-hand side. Because Native Americans died so quickly or escaped back to their tribes so easily, and indentured servants were only temporary workers, Southern farmers still had a major labor issue. This continued until 1619, when the first boatload of slaves from Africa arrived in Virginia. Now, this goes on your chart. Because the Africans had been exposed to the same diseases as the Europeans, Africans had an immunity to the diseases that had killed so many Native Americans. So that was one problem solved. Secondly, because the Africans were slaves, they were purchased by the farmers forever. They were permanent. They were not freed. They could not leave whenever they were done. Right? This solved the labor problem for the southern farmers. Of course, it caused a lot of problems for the Africans, obviously. Please make sure that you have written this in the result part of group number 3, African slaves. Now, up here, and you'll see it in full screen, is a short movie clip from a movie called Roots. It shows some of the southern farmers comparing indentured servants from England, who were white, to the African slaves. Right? Sounds kind of racist, but it's historically accurate because this is the way they thought and this is why they did things. Right? So please watch this very short clip.
When I was a lad, we had indentured bond servants, stout Cornishmen and Scotsmen.
Scourings of Newgate Prison they were, pickpockets and highwaymen.
Indeed, sir, indeed. And if one of them runs away, you couldn't tell him from any other Englishman. But take a black slave, sir. By Harry, no matter how far they run, they're always black.
Slaves brought to America, and this is North America, Central America, and South America, came on sailboats that were involved in the triangle trade. We've talked about this in the very first lesson of the unit. The part of the triangle trade where the ships were going from Africa to North, Central, or South America was called the Middle Crossing. Now, these slave ships were literally full of slaves. The slaves were packed in very tightly into the ships. As you can see from this diagram, look closely, these are human figures. The idea for the ship owner was, the ship has to go across, I fill it full of slaves that I've bought. The more slaves I put in there, the more slaves I will be able to sell when I get to America. The more slaves I sell, the more money I make. So it was economically smart for the ship owners to pack the slaves in on these ships as tightly as they possibly could be packed and feed them and treat them with the absolute minimum of kindness and with food and medicines and things like that. Okay? Many, many slaves died in this middle passage. It was, as we will see, a nightmare. People, if they do bad in their life and they go to HE double hockey sticks and live the rest of their life down there, that's kind of what these people went through on the middle passage on these slave ships. Just absolutely horrible. Now, the following clip is from the movie Amistad, which is about one of these slave ships called the Amistad, which was the name of the ship. The movie itself is much, much longer, obviously, and much, much more graphic. If you are interested in learning more about this, then you could probably rent it somewhere, but I'm pretty sure it's not a PG-13 kind of thing. It's kind of nasty. All right. So this is a cut up, edited version, but it still kind of gets the point across about what life was like in the slave ship in that middle passage. Definitely not something that anyone would want.
Oh, Mamaja, we look at it. Can you bad that? Oh! Sembe. Apa velo?
Este está enfermo, no le des nada. Dales comida solo a los que están sanos. Calóngame. Esto sí, sí. Esta no. Esta no. Mira esta.
If slaves survived the middle crossing, they were sold by the ship owners to anyone who needed a slave. This was done at slave auctions in the port cities. There were slave auctions in New York City where these slave ships would come in too. So this was not just the southern thing, although most of it was in the south, but not all of it was in the south. These auctions are where farmers could bid money on a slave that they wanted to buy. This is exactly what people do on eBay now, but not for humans. Please watch the video clip.
Gentlemen, your attention, I beg. As advertised, we have a fine cargo of choice, healthy slaves recently landed by the Lord Ligonier, largely from the River Gambia. They've made a fine passage and in prime, healthy condition. It's a fine batch up here.
Good lines to that one.
Look at his eyes. He's not even close to being broken.
Now, here's a likely-looking hand, a prime young buck, just picked from the trees. Bright as a monkey. Good bones, sinew. Wanted free of defect. Good teeth, good for Carolina rice. Virginia tobacco, Maryland corn. Pull like an ox and carry like a mule. Step up, see for yourself, gentlemen. He's free of thieves, piles, French pox. He's young, biddable, fine animal, gentlemen. I'm going to start the bidding at 150. There's no need to waste time. He's the pick of the herd, gentlemen. You won't find his like in these degenerate days. Who'll give me 150? I hear 150. All right. 125. Gentlemen, I sold a buck, half of this, for 200 guineas a fortnight ago in Baltimore. 125, 125, 130, I'll go 130. Hey, I'll go 125, I want to go 30. 130. 130, you'll give me 135, 135, 130, 130, 135. 145, sold.
This slide shows the same chart that you have on your note sheet to use for questions numbered 1, 2, and 3 on your note sheet. Before you look at the questions on your note sheet, really examine this chart. You can use the one on the screen in front of you or the one on your note sheet. They are exactly the same. Remember, the nice thing about charts and graphs is the answers are right there. But also remember the tricky part of graphs and charts is on the X or Y axis sometimes. So be very careful. Look at everything. All right? Look very closely before you start answering the questions. Question number 1. During what time period were most slaves brought to America? Please remember that America includes British North America, the British Caribbean, French Caribbean, Spanish American, Dutch Caribbean, Danish Caribbean, and the colony of Brazil, which was controlled by the country of Portugal. So all of them. All right. So that's the question you have to answer. During what time period were the most slaves brought to America? 1601 to 1700, 1701 to 1810. Which one of those had the most? Question number 2. What was the total number of slaves brought to the British colonies in North America between 1601 and 1810? Please remember to look at the graph carefully before you answer that question that you might see again on the quiz at the end of this station. Hint, hint, hint. Question number 3. Where did the greatest number of slaves go from 1601 to 1810? And that could be any of these areas during any of these years. Where did the greatest number of slaves go? So again, you may see this chart on the quiz at the end of this station, so please pay very close attention. Okay, you flipped your note sheet over, and we are on the back side now. You are going to use the two-step analysis process that we learned in class and use it on both of these pictures. If you have already done station number 6, then this drawing is a bit of a review. But please do a good job on it anyway, because you need to compare what you see in this picture and the details that are here with the details that are in this picture. Now the two-step process, please remember, is you draw a line halfway across the drawing, and you do that for both of them. All right, and then halfway up and down. Okay, So you do that on both drawings. Now you have 2 drawings, so you can just do the 2-step, you can do the process over here. Draw your lines, and then step 2, label everything. Okay, now again, if you've already done station number 6, you should already be able to do this one pretty quickly. This one doesn't have as much stuff in there, just amount of stuff, but the things that are there are drawn a little bit better and with a little bit more detail. So over here, you're still going to have a lot of stuff, okay, because you can actually see a lot more detail in like the clothing and what everybody is doing and what's in the background and what are they walking on and all the rest of that stuff. Okay, now remember that you have to do the 2-step process before you answer question number 4, 5, and 6 on your note sheet. Remember to include details from the pictures. When you are answering the questions, I need you to use details that were exactly from the picture. Okay, so for example, question number 4. What do the slaves have in common in both pictures? Okay, so exactly what from the pictures do the slaves have in common in both pictures? You know, details, exact details. Question 5. What do the owners have in common in both pictures? So again, exactly what did you see in the pictures? What details were in both pictures do the owners in both pictures have in common? All right. And lastly, right, according to the artist, exactly, use details, how did the tobacco get to England? All right, so both pictures, that's how you're putting details in from both of them. Okay? Now, please get that done. You can pause the movie while you are getting that done. When you are completely done with all 6 questions, study this note sheet and then put it in your Maps and Dittos section of your binder. Once you have done that, please see Mr. Deserto, that's me, for the station number 7 quiz. Please get that done. Thank you, and good luck.